chemical molecules, and there's 30, 40 of those. Now, you are right. You can measure xenoestrogens, but that's an entirely different test, and it usually has to be sent off to a lab that, guess what, is called a toxicology lab, with good reason, because those are toxins. And toxicology labs can measure a large variety of xenoestrogens, but it's not done while we're monitoring the estrogens that a woman is rubbing on or a guy is rubbing on, because that's what we're wanting to monitor. Now, every once in a while, someone will come in and say, look, I have heard that the penguins in Antarctica have DDT in their penguin fat, and the polar bears have lead in their polar bear fat, and the whole world is polluted, which unfortunately is true. And I want to know how polluted I am. And so fine, we'll check them for xenoestrogens at that point. But again, it has to be sent off to a toxicology lab.
Got it. I understand from reading your book that the compounding pharmacies, obviously along with many of the supplements and the bioidentical hormones, are potentially and consistently being threatened by the FDA.
Yes and no.
Okay.
The first big threat was in 2008 when FDA, who I like to go along with the Mexicans and call them Los Federales, because they behave sort of like that, kind of autocratic, and you'll do what we say no matter what, like that. They sent out a warning letter to compounding pharmacies saying that they should not be supplying estriol. Now, we all know that estriol belongs in human bodies, and that if we're going to do bioidentical hormones at all, we need its anti-carcinogenic potential. So fortunately, the Alliance for Natural Health and a lot of other people got a campaign going. There were even full-page ads in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Congressional Record and USA Today, saying how, in summary, FDA wanted to make a hormone naturally present in the human body illegal. And there were over 100,000 emails to members of Congress at that point. And even though FDA doesn't pay attention because they don't get elected, the congressional people paid attention, and something happened, and that whole anti-estriol campaign just ground to a halt. What was even funnier, though, is that the Wyeth Company, which made the Premarin, had filed a citizen's petition. Would FDA pay attention to you or me if we filed a citizen's petition? Probably not. But they paid attention to Wyeth as a citizen against estriol, and then they were found out. And that got put into the Congressional Record, too, as an ad. They were selling estriol over in Europe, and over here they were trying to get it banned.
Wow.
That's quite remarkable. Somebody could read German, read a Wyeth commercial, and sure enough, there was estriol in it over in Germany. So that stopped. Okay. And one can still prescribe the estrogens with the estriol as one should. Now, the other, let's call it undercover harassment, is that at various times, FDA has gone after, in the natural food stores, DHEA, in the topical form, the rub-in form, which is the way it ought to be used. Oddly enough, and you can't sell it anymore that way, oddly enough, you can still get the pills, which is the least effective form. And they're in all the stores. Then there are some of these metabolites, and remember, I keep yammering on about pro and anti-carcinogenic metabolites?
Right.
Well, I want those, and they're natural, and they should be able to be prescribed. But for a while, FDA was interfering with the importation of the 2-methoxyestradiol, which is that really potent natural anti-carcinogen. They were interfering with it, and the compounding pharmacists could hardly get it. Why were they interfering with it? Could it be a coincidence that there's some patent medicine company that has made up the name Pan-Them because this stuff is so powerful against cancers, and they have it in phase 2 and phase 3 trials against cancer, so they can get it FDA, quote, approved, unquote, and sell it at a giant high price? Could it be a coincidence? Oh, who knows? But anyway, we still can get 2-methoxyestradiol here and there, but it's a lot harder and it's a lot higher price than it would be if there weren't, it wasn't being turned back at the border, is the way it goes. Now, there also, by the way, is an anti-carcinogenic testosterone. And by the way, this is all very hard science-based. I'm not making it up. Your audience hasn't heard about it, but there's an anti-carcinogenic testosterone. It was first worked out at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, Stockholm. And since then, oh my, I have a giant file of scientific articles on this stuff. And in experimental animals, so far, this anti-carcinogenic testosterone has helped prostate cancer to regress. How do you like that?
God, that's the very opposite of what men have been taught for years.
Well, yeah. But if those guys out there who need to, please read Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, his book called Testosterone for Life. He's a professor at Harvard, which is where I went to school, undergrad, and they told me then that everything Harvard said must be true. So I believed it, didn't I? So everything Dr. Morgentaler writes is based on science. It is true. And what he says is that the guys with the lowest testosterone are at the greatest risk for prostate cancer. No kidding. The most aggressive form. And he then has an article published in 2011 in which men with prostate cancer were given testosterone, and it did not make the cancer grow in the short and intermediate term. I'm quoting Professor Morgentaler. But that's just plain old testosterone. There's this anti-carcinogenic metabolite of testosterone, I should say, that in experimental animal research actually made prostate cancer regress, and the mechanisms of action of how it works against cancer are known, but we can summarize them by saying that when cancers start to form, the cells look disorganized under a microscope, and the worse the cancer, the more the cells are disorganized. And this anti-carcinogenic testosterone actually helps them to reorganize and look like normal cells. It's pretty cool. All right. Well, where I was going with that is to answer your question about FDA harassment. When I'd read up on that, I called three of the compounding pharmacists I know. Can you get this stuff? And for a while, they could get it, and I could put it into prescriptions for men with cancer without any fear, because the researchers have identified that this anti-carcinogenic testosterone metabolite, let's call it by its short nickname, it's called 3-beta-adiol. It is a testosterone, but it only contacts estrogen receptor beta. It doesn't contact testosterone receptors. All the researchers are very clear about that. And estrogen receptor beta is the anti-carcinogenic receptor. That's the one that estriol stimulates too. And so this stuff can only contact the anti-carcinogenic receptor, so it's quite safe for guys with cancer. And the experimental animals work shows it helped the cancers to regress. Well, guess what? The compounding pharmacists can't get it right now. Somehow, the supply of it is being interfered with.
That is tragic.
Yeah, it's depressing.
You know, I read at the Life Extension in their big dictionary, their book about years ago, they had avocado extract that people were taking in the evening and losing a ton of weight. And a pharmaceutical company realized that it was working, patented it, and then ordered the Life Extension Foundation that they were not allowed to sell it anymore. This also happened with B6?
It's for a certain form of B6 called pyridoxamine, which is found in nature, but some patent medicine company went and got it, quote, approved, unquote. But the big scandal, which really got a lot of publicity, even the New England Journal of Medicine complained, and they hardly ever complained, was that the number one medication to prevent gout attacks, called colchicine, which has been used since the time of the Egyptians, and Ben Franklin is said to have imported it from Europe to be used in this country against gout. Why, it sold for 8 cents a pill, ma'am. And then some company noticed that it had never been put up for FDA approval. Now, good grief, the stuff has been around for at least since colonial times, so what's it need FDA approval for? But it never had been, so they rushed it through FDA approval, got it approved. FDA promptly ordered all the generic, so-called, off the market. Instead of 8 cents a pill, you know what it costs you or your insurance company?
What?
$5 a pill.
I was going to say $5 a pill, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so criminal. It's very hard to hear this. Very difficult. Share what happened with the pyridoxamine.
Well, same thing happened.
Yeah,
it got, exactly, quote, approved, unquote. And so now you can buy it on prescription at a big high price, and before you could buy it at a low price in the health food store.
Are they going to do this to everything? I mean,